I ruined the one man who genuinely loved me. Now, 6 years later, I saw him again, living a life I never belonged to. And what he did next cut deeper than anything I had done to him. I was 28 back then, married to David, a gentle, brilliant soul. He wasn't flashy or grand with his affections, but his love showed up in the quietest, most meaningful ways. He'd brew my coffee perfectly every morning, fold my laundry before I even noticed, and remembered my mother's birthday better than I did. He was the kind of man who made life feel calm and anchored. But I was restless. I mistook his dependability for dullness. I convinced myself I needed more excitement, more fire, more attention. My boss, with his polished charm and confident smile, offered just that. At first, I brushed off his flirtations. But over time, I started craving them. They fed my ego. They made me feel seen in a way I foolishly believed David no longer could. One casual drink became two. A few lingering touches turned into stolen nights I wish I could erase. It was never love, just vanity, desire, and a hunger to feel wanted. I lied to myself. I told myself it was harmless, that David would never know, that this phase would pass. But secrets like that don't stay buried. They seep into the quiet spaces between two people until everything breaks. One evening, I came home and found David sitting at the dining table, my phone in his hand. The look on his face is burned into my memory, not angry, not tearful, just empty. As if the light in him had gone out. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He asked one question, why? And I had nothing to give him. No excuse that didn't sound pathetic. No explanation that could possibly make it right. He packed a small bag that night and walked out. No scene. No pleading. Just quiet devastation. I thought he might return. He never did. A month later, the divorce papers arrived. He didn't ask for anything, not the apartment, not the car, not even a piece of furniture. It was like he was erasing me from his life entirely. And my boss? He lost interest just as quickly as he'd gained it. A few months later, he had someone else hanging on his every word. I had given up everything for nothing. Absolutely nothing. The fallout wasn't sudden, it was slow and bitter. I moved to a new city. Switched jobs. Sat through therapy sessions that never reached the core of my shame. But the guilt clung to me like a second skin. And David, his absence followed me everywhere. I told myself stories to make it easier. That maybe he had found someone who loved him better, who understood the value of his quiet kindness. But even those stories couldn't dull the ache. I had wounded him, and in doing so, I had broken something inside myself. Every relationship that followed mirrored my damage. I flinched when someone was kind to me. I pulled away from stability because it felt false. I filled my days with work, shallow friendships, and empty dates that ended in forced smiles and long, lonely walks home. The nights were always the hardest. That's when my thoughts would race. That's when his voice would echo loudest in my mind, when I'd remember the way he used to say my name. And then, last week, life decided to remind me just how far I'd fallen. I was browsing a bookstore, wandering through fiction when I heard a laugh. A deep, warm, unmistakable laugh. My heart skipped. I turned, and there he was. David. He was standing near the biography section, holding a little girl's hand. She looked about 4. She had his eyes, soft, patient, impossibly familiar. Then a woman joined them. Graceful. Radiant. She rested a hand on his arm, and he smiled at her in that same quiet, loving way he used to smile at me. They looked like something out of a family photo, whole, joyful, complete. A world I no longer belonged to. I don't think he saw me. Or maybe he did, and he simply chose not to acknowledge it. I didn't approach. I couldn't. I just stood there, heart pounding, throat tight, watching the life that could have been mine. Then I left. but the image burned itself into my mind. I kept seeing the way his daughter leaned into him, the way he crouched to hear her better, the way he smiled at his wife like nothing in the world was missing. It felt like watching a memory I had no right to witness. I was nothing more than a shadow outside their light. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, no lights, a half-empty glass of wine, and silence so thick it pressed against my chest. I stared at the ceiling, drowning in the weight of my own choices. It hit me then, how long I had been carrying this story alone. A story heavy with regret. A story without forgiveness or closure. Maybe that's why I'm writing this now. Not for pity. Not for sympathy. And certainly not for redemption. But because sometimes the truth needs to be laid bare, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. I understand it's far too late for closure. But some truths demand to be spoken, even if they echo into nothingness. The days following that moment in the bookstore blurred together. Work became hollow. Conversations felt distant. My thoughts kept circling back to David, to the sight of him with his new life, to the question I couldn't shake: did he truly not notice me, or did he see me and choose silence? Either possibility hurt. One implied I'd become invisible. The other suggested he had simply moved on, and left me behind. Then, one quiet morning, I sat sipping my coffee, staring through the window at a world moving on without me, and something within me settled. A strange, steady clarity. I had spent years lost in guilt, telling myself comforting, pitiful stories. I had cried, journaled, confided in therapists. But never, not once, had I taken real responsibility. Not in a way that mattered. Not in a way that could shift something inside me. Because regret, if not followed by action, is just self-indulgence. So I made a decision. Not to seek forgiveness, but to acknowledge the pain I'd caused. Not to rewrite the past, but to face it. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not an apology in the traditional sense, it wasn't about making amends or asking for anything. It was a confession. A full, honest, vulnerable admission of what I had done and who I had been. I wrote about how I mistook his calm for dullness. How I confused safety with lack of passion. How my choices came not from love, but from ego, an insecure desire to feel wanted, no matter the cost. I thanked him. For the quiet care. For the way he remembered my mother's birthday. For the perfect cup of coffee each morning. For the countless ways he loved me, gently and without condition. And then came the hardest line I've ever had to write. You deserve someone better, and I'm truly glad you found her. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope. I didn't know where he lived now, but I remembered the name of the company he once worked for. I mailed it there, not sure if it would reach him, not sure if he'd even want to read it. But writing it, sending it, that felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 6 long years. I didn't expect a response. I didn't even hope for one. But for the first time in years, I felt something loosen inside me. A knot untying. Days passed. The heaviness didn't disappear, but it lifted just enough to let air in. I noticed the way morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles. I listened to the soft tapping of rain on the window. These small details, once muted by shame, felt like tiny invitations back to life. It was as if telling the truth, out loud and without excuses, had released me from the loop of self-inflicted punishment I'd been trapped in. And then, a week later, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A letter. No name. Just my own written on the front, in handwriting I knew instantly. My heart hammered in my chest as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Simple. Direct. But it unraveled me. I saw you in the bookstore. I didn't come over because I wanted you to see that I'm okay. Not to hurt you, but to give you peace. We weren't meant to last. But that doesn't make what we had meaningless. I don't carry anger anymore. Life has a way of healing us in ways we never expect. I hope you find your peace, too. I read it again. Then again. Until the words blurred behind the tears. It wasn't forgiveness, not in the way I'd imagined. It was something deeper. It was release. Acceptance. The quiet closing of a door that no longer needed to remain open. David had made peace with the past. And now, I understood, it was my turn to do the same. I began to see that healing wasn't about forgetting or pretending. It was about allowing the past to exist without letting it own me. I couldn't rewrite what I'd done. But I could choose what I did next. I gently folded his letter and placed it inside a small wooden box. Alongside it, I tucked away the only photo I still had of us as faded, curled at the corners, but real. I closed the lid. Not to bury the past, but to finally put it where it belonged. That evening, I stepped outside. The wind brushed against my skin, cool and soft. And for the first time in 6 years, I felt something like freedom. Not because I had let go of the weight, but because I'd stopped holding it alone. I never needed David's forgiveness to move forward. I needed my own. And at long last, I was ready to find it.